See that, folks. I'm going to tell you a ghost story. A true ghost story. Now, this ghost story takes place in Coleraine, and it involves a young girl and her boyfriend who had decided they were going to rent the house up that direction. They went and viewed the house, and the lady said it was absolutely beautiful. They loved it from the get-go. It was nothing absolute. It was nothing out of the ordinary, but for them, it was everything they wanted. It had 2 bedrooms, it had a nice big living room, and it had a nice decent sized kitchen. And that was just everything they were after. They just wanted out of the city. They were originally from Belfast. Now, for the first few weeks, everything was grand. There was no issues, there was no problems, there was nothing there out of the ordinary. Till this night, the girl was sleeping, and she said she was awoke with a lady screaming. She heard somebody screaming. But when she jumped up out of the bed, her husband asked why she was what was wrong with her, everything okay? And she said, "Did you not hear that lady screaming? Not hear a girl screaming?" He said, "No, I didn't hear nothing." She says, "How can you not hear that?" She said it was as loud as a woman standing in the room with her. She went downstairs. She checked up and down the street. She checked everywhere. She checked her own head. She thought she was going nuts. She said this was like somebody standing beside her screaming, and her husband couldn't hear it. When she came back into the house again, it stopped. But she left her wondering, I said, what's going on here? Because she wasn't speaking to her husband. Her husband's going, "I can't hear nothing at all." So either he's going deaf or I'm going crazy. That's what she was thinking to herself. So they got up the next morning. She didn't get much sleep. She was pretty concerned about everything she heard. So she sits down for breakfast and she's speaking to her husband about it. And her husband said, maybe you could have been caught trapped in kind of semi-conscious dream state. You read things about this and could quite well have been what happened to you. But just put it behind you and see, maybe get a good rest tonight. You'll get a sleep tonight. Just put it behind. Just don't be dwelling on it. You're going to put your own head away. So that's dead on. So her husband goes away on to work. She's hanging about the house that day. So she's standing in the house, and while she's in the kitchen, she's clearing a few things away. And she hears something in the living room. But not only does she hear something, she feels the presence of something in the house. So she leaves the kitchen and she walks into the living room, and she said there was a man standing in her living room and he was staring out the window and he wouldn't turn around, and she panicked. She says, "Who are you? What are you doing in my house? Get out of my house, get out of my house." And she freaks out. She says, as the guy is just about to turn his head, she says he just fizzles out. He just fades into nothingness. At this, she absolutely freaks out and runs out of the house. She phones her husband and says to her husband what she'd just seen. At this point, her husband's getting really concerned. Number 1, she's hearing voices. Number 2, she's seeing things appear and disappear. It just didn't sit right with him. He was getting very concerned about her. So he says to her on the phone, "Listen, why don't you take yourself out a walk?" See, the problem was they'd moved away from Belfast. That there's where their families and stuff were from. So it's not like she could just walk around the corner and go and sit with her mummy and get her head shot. So she went out and she went into the town, and she walked around the town a wee bit trying to clear her head. She just couldn't. She sat and she had a coffee and she phoned her husband. And she says to her husband, "I don't think I can go back into that house after what I seen there." He says, "Listen, you may be a bit stressed and stuff with the move. Maybe, were you sleeping? Did you get up again out of a sleep?" She says, "I wasn't. I was awake. I was awake from had our breakfast. I was doing stuff around the house. I walked in and the guy was standing there. He was about 6 foot tall. He had a long black coat on, and he just was about to turn around and look at me, and he just faded out and disappeared. There's something in that house. I'm not going back to it." To which he replied, "Listen, we need to go back to the house. We've took a lease out on it. We need to just go back and sort it out. I'll stay the night and I'll take tomorrow off." So he finishes work early because he's quite concerned about her, and the two of them go home. He manages to get her into the house. So they're sitting on the sofa, and she's trying to explain to him how it felt, the atmosphere, everything else that went along with it. And she goes up to go upstairs and she asks him to go with her. And he says, "Listen, you can't be starting this. you need to get comfortable in your house. It's your home. And even if it is what you're thinking that it is, you need to let them know it's your home and not its home. So walk on up the stairs and do what you need to do and never mind it. He's still sitting more concerned about her mental health than anything else. So it ends up the husband's sitting there after she walks upstairs, and he says then he felt an overwhelming sense of forebodingness come over him in the room. But right away he's going, is this because the way my wife's feeling is starting to kind of reflect on me? And then he said all of a sudden in the corner he seen a mist developing. He said it was like a black mist, and it was kind of pulsating and rotating and pulsating and rotating. And he could see it trying to make into a form. He was panicked at this point. He couldn't even shout for his wife. He said he couldn't even speak. So he's watching this mist pulsating and rotating and pulsating and rotating. And then all of a sudden it just, he says it rolled into itself and just disappeared. So his wife came downstairs and he's sitting there white as a sheet. His wife said he looked like a dead body himself. It looked like he was hunting the house. And she says to him, you okay? And he says, love, I think we need to go out a walk. Come out for a walk with me. So she does. And the two of them are walking down the street. There's not a word spoke till they get about 5 doors down. And he says to her, I know what you've seen. I believe you've seen something. And she went, why? What's changed your mind so quickly? Why all of a sudden am I that nuts? And he explained about seeing the mist. And at this, she was going to told you, so we can't go back to that house. I'm not going back near that house. And he says, we've no choice. We'll have to go back to the house. We need to just go back. We need to try and get some holy water or something of some form and float around the house. They didn't know where to go. They didn't really know what to be doing. So it ended up, they finished their coffee and they got up. They walked down the street and they says, listen, let's go. So the two of them go into the house. They get back home and they go into the house and they sit there and they put the TV on and they try their hardest to act as normal. That night comes and they go to bed. And while they're sleeping, the guy says he struggled to sleep. He struggled, he was back and forward tossing. He says the atmosphere in the room was really bad. He didn't know whether it was anything was there then or whether it was just him consistently thinking about that day. Especially when it appeared during the day. You expect all this at night time in the movies and whatnot. You don't really see it happening at daytime. And it's happening in broad daylight in the middle of the afternoon. So he's lying in bed and he tries to sleep. He can't sleep. His wife seems to go over, and all of a sudden that sense of forebodingness gets heavier and heavier and heavier. Real sense of melancholy all over the house. He could feel it in the room anyway. He says then all of a sudden he seen the mist again start to appear in the corner, and he grabbed his wife by the leg and he squeezed her leg really tight with his hand. He was nearly digging his nails into her to try and wake her up without shaking too much. And at this, she jumped up and said, say, what are you doing? And he just like, with his head, and she just turned and looked, and she seen the mist. And the mist was pulsating, rolling, black and green, and consistently going round. And then all of a sudden, the outline of a man appeared. Once again with his back to them and staring out the window. At this, they're staring at each other, and they're lost for words. They don't know what to do, what to say. They're literally catatonic and awake. And they're just staring at this entity in the room, and it just turns round and looks at him, and its face, part of its face is missing, and the other part's just staring at them. And at this he says, what do you want? What do you want? Get out of our house. Get out of our house. You're not welcome in our house. And at this it just turns and goes to walk to the bedroom door and just fades out and disappears. So the next morning came. They got up. They were absolutely terrified all night. They got their stuff and they went out and threw it in the car. They phoned the landlord and said to the landlord they couldn't stay there. The landlord said they're tied into a year's lease, and they says, listen, you didn't make us aware of what's going on in that house. The landlord said there's nothing wrong with the house is okay. And he says, what's your turnover in that house? There's umpteen people had moved in and out and in and out and in and out. So it ended up that they had said to him, listen, want our deposit back? We're not staying in the house. The landlord fought them tooth and nail for it. It ended up they lost their deposit and they moved back to Belfast. And they says, to be quite honest with you, they'd rather give them the deposit than go back into the house. Now, I don't know where in Coleraine that house is, or what happened to whoever it was, or whether they left, or whenever he had said, "You're not welcome in our house," they turned and walked towards the door, but I don't know. Or whatever happened to the person. Maybe it was a violent death. Maybe it was something that wasn't resting. It was something that was unsaid or undone it needed to do before it rested. Because it looked like somebody that had died horrendously based on the details that they had given of how the entity presented itself to them. So maybe it was just a stuck soul. Maybe it had no intentions of injuring or hurting anybody. Maybe it was just trying to show them that, like, this is what happened to me and I didn't get the chance to say goodbye to my family. Then on the flip side, well, for those of you who listened and watched the number 91, you never know what you're dealing with. They can present themselves as injured men, battered women, young children lost. You never know what you're dealing with. So, to be safe, I would have done what they done. I would have got out, or got a priest in, and got out, got the priest in, and moved back on after the priest if he was able to deal with it. You don't toy with stuff like that. Most definitely not. Well, folks, thanks for watching, and thanks for sending the story in. Gar mille miogat. Slán.